All right, COVID news. Immunity acquired from COVID infection is as protective as vaccination against severe illness and death, study finds. The
Yeah,
immunity
at
generated.
least as high,
Uh-huh.
if not higher.
Okay, the immunity generated from an infection was found to be at least as high, if not higher, than the provided 2 doses of mRNA vaccine. We
Now, you
okay.
can Google this to just put it on the screen if you want,
Mm-hmm.
or otherwise, people can just take my word for it and
Mm-hmm.
they can Google it themselves.
Mm-hmm.
We lost at least 8,000 military members for refusing the COVID vaccine.
Mm-hmm.
And we lost who knows how many other numbers of government workers for a similar refusal.
Uh-huh. And what does that got to
Now,
do with this?
how many of those military members already had COVID?
Oh, I don't know.
Me neither. What if it was half?
I don't care.
This is the thing that frustrates me
Mm-hmm.
is our retention in government and military services is historically low right now. And our recruitment is too.
Yes.
And yet, we make mandates for people to take the first vaccine of its kind blindly and say, if you don't do this, you get kicked out.
Was it the first vaccine of its kind?
It is the first one that's approved for public use in the world.
For mRNA.
Yeah, the first Myrna vaccine of its kind that was approved for public use. Every previous one had not been developed yet enough. There was one that was attempted for Ebola in 2013,
Mm-hmm.
except that the Myrna degenerated before it could actually make it into cells. And so the development that changed was that the nanolipids were developed that allowed the Myrna to make it into cells before it degenerated.
Okay.
So, yes, this is the first vaccine that is approved for public use that is supposedly effective.
Okay.
The first of its kind, ever.
Okay. Great. This is a fantastic breakthrough. I'm glad we have it.
It's an experiment.
No.
Yes.
No. It's been
And
experimented with, and that the experiments have determined that it is acceptable for human use. They've already done the experiments. This isn't an experiment. Uh, when
I think it's reasonable to be skeptical of it, especially when the Trump administration is the one that developed this vaccine, or it was developed under the Trump administration in Operation Warp Speed.
mm-hmm, which was a government removing regulations so that the science could work faster.
So,
And
are you saying that removing or adding regulations or keeping them the same is better or worse? Because now we're a
I
different
I
world.
don't regulation isn't like a thing I want more of or want less of. It's a thing that needs to be done appropriately. Regulation is appropriate in certain situations, and
We just
removing
talked
them
about a
is
situation
appropriate.
where
Yes,
removing regulations hurt people.
yes, it did. Because Republicans aren't smart enough. Republicans say, oh, regulation bad, get rid of it. Because they're dumb.
The
When you say
You're
all
calling
regulation,
okay, hold on.
yeah,
Republicans repealed regulations on or not repealed, but waived regulations on the development of this vaccine,
right. Because
but
there's
now
an
they're smart
urgency.
enough to recognize what regulations need to be waived and what don't because there's an urgency because what uh
Millions of people are
why
dying because of COVID. Yes, that needs to be moved faster. So when millions of people are dying because of COVID, we need to let the smart people, the scientists and the doctors, determine what those regulations should be and which ones they can get rid of. The uh, we let during Operation Warp Speed, the smartest, most intelligent, most properly equipped people make the decisions instead of the politicians, and it worked. It was great,
You are
fantastic.
giving a lot of credit to Republicans right now.
How? By them standing
Because
the fuck out of the way?
Operation Warp Speed was a
Yes,
Trump policy.
yes.
That's why.
And
Yeah.
he is predisposed to removing regulations. And if he had said, okay, we're removing the regulations and I'm putting Jared Kushner in charge of making the medicine, I would have said the Operation Warp Speed is shit. But Warp Speed worked well because the politicians weren't in it. The politicians weren't putting their fingers in there. They weren't putting plans in there to get it to their constituency and not somebody else's. They weren't creating plans to make sure that it gets done in Arkansas but not in Florida. None of that happened. The smartest people in the world saw that there was a problem, a world-changing problem, and they fixed it. They skipped the long bureaucratic steps that would normally go along with one of these immunizations, and they got the experiments done before they gave it to the people, and it was working, and it was good, and it worked. Humanity, when they put their mind to it, and no politician gets in their way, can do important and good things.
See, I don't know about that. We don't know what this has done to us.
Yes, we do.
No, we don't.
Yes, we do.
We
There
absolutely
is
don't.
there.
That's false.
Great. I've had mRNA vaccines, and I'm fine. So,
2 years later,
yeah,
you're fine.
maybe even 3. When did I get mine? I was one of the experiments. I volunteered to take it as early as possible.
See, here's
I
the thing, though,
mhm,
is that effects can occur 10, 20 years down the line. And I'm not saying they will.
mhm,
I'm saying that people that were skeptical or hesitant to take the vaccine, the
mhm,
first of its kind,
mhm,
approved for public use,
mhm.
that's a reasonable decision.
Is it
It is. It's a
okay?
reasonable decision. And we lost a lot of people from our workforce in the
Mhm,
government
mhm.
because they made a reasonable decision.
And
And now
70% of
it's
them have
saying
received
that
general discharges. Yeah.
a lot of them, many of them who probably had COVID already, or could, at least a handful of them could prove that they did. The government refused to recognize natural immunity from previous COVID infection as an inoculation against COVID.
Because they didn't have this study at the time.
They had other studies.
They
This one is just definitive.
This one is definitive. Yes, great. And if one guy says, "I no, I don't think that's a good policy," how do you make that policy? One, get have proof that you had COVID and then you don't have to get the shot.
Yeah.
That's a shit policy. How do you enforce that? How do you come up with that? Where's the test? Do you have to pay for all of these people to get their what's the immunize test to whether or not you have immunity? There's like a blood test you can do, right? That says you're immune to certain things.
The antibodies
The
test. Yeah.
antibody
No.
test.
Well,
That's what I'm talking
you know
about.
what?
Do you pay for all of these fools to get
How
antibody
about
tests? No.
how about a
Fuck off.
positive COVID test? The one that you were required to get if you ever had any symptoms at all. You had to
Hmm.
go get a COVID test where they shoved a stick up your nose
Right.
to swab you,
And said you're
and then
positive.
they said you're positive. Well, how about that? That counts as proof that you had
Okay, but
COVID.
what about the guy who got it before the tests were out? There were people who had it, and the doctor said, "Hey, you probably have this COVID thing. We don't have a test yet." It's
Well,
it's just filled
then just
with
approve it for people
loopholes.
that had tests.
It's filled with loopholes. I recognize what
Oh,
they did
hold
by
on.
kicking these
Doorbell
people
ring.
out. Okay, I recognize what they did for these people, and I'm fine with it.
What are you highlighting there?
I was just this lieutenant general says there's no impact across readiness, even though
or vaccination.
3,400 for the 3,400 troops that were removed. Um,
Other ones have said 8,000.
I
Other
don't
sources.
recognize this as a thing. I mean, this isn't a good excuse. It's not. There is a literal world-changing virus, and by refusing, you are uh, actively saying no. What else are you going to actively say no to? They won't. I can't imagine a person who's willing to get shot at but not take an mRNA vaccine. What's the next order they're going to disregard because they don't like it? I recognize that it's shitty and there might be a small amount of people, but I think that these 3,400 people mostly are ideologues.
I
They are
think that
people
people
who.
have a
Mm,
reasonable objection, especially if they have been previously infected with the disease, survived it. They would have, I think, reasonable cause at that point to say, "Well, I got infected.
so I
Why
won't
should
take
I?
the
Why should I have to get inoculated via a vaccine? I've already been inoculated via
because
infection."
it makes you even more immune, makes you better.
I mean, it's silly. It doesn't make sense to me.
Well, that's it's virology. It doesn't make sense to
Why do
most
we do
people.
this? Like
Why do we do what?
well, hold on. I'm not saying why do we do that in terms of virology. I'm talking about if natural immunity from being previously infected is as good as the vaccine, which is, by the way, something that people have been saying for over a year and a half now.
It's always been true. I knew this before COVID happened
Why didn't the government recognize it?
because they don't have the proof.
You have the proof in a positive COVID test.
Positive COVID tests are a uh, diagnostic tool, not an absolute proof. I can prove whether or not somebody got the shot because it's documented properly. You can prove that someone was sick and had the test and it came back positive. That is evidence.
I
The
think that's, and unless you're saying that the COVID tests, not the rapid ones, I'll agree
Mhm.
that the rapid ones are only about 50% accurate,
Right.
but the actual ones that people got that they drove into drive-throughs for and had their freaking sinuses swabbed with a that shit hurt.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, they had their sinuses swabbed. Uh, I'd say that test probably should be adequate proof that you have had the COVID virus at least. And you're saying you've known this for a while.
It's been true of chickenpox forever, right?
Well,
We
I
we
had
this is
chickenpox before the vaccine was
right. So did I. I
approved for
had chickenpox
chickenpox.
as a child, and now I cannot get chickenpox again. My own son got an immunization for it, and he never had the chickenpox, and he never will. This is a
Well,
thing
there you
we've
go.
known. This is a thing we've known. This is not new. You are reading this headline like this is some sort of new thing, but it's not. We already knew this. This is obvious. This is
Then
not
why
new
did the government not approve natural immunity as an alternative to getting a vaccine?
because it's hard to prove. One and two, they don't want
It's
people who
documented
won't. It's document. No, it's documented that you had a test.
that tested positive.
The tested positive. Yes, it's documented probably in the health records that says, "Hey, you had a positive test." Great.
Good
How?
enough for me.
Not good enough for the government. Not good enough for
Should be.
troops. No, it's not. It's uh, no, it's not. If you had it, a mild case. Have you ever heard of people getting the chickenpox twice? It's happened.
Yeah, except the second time it's very mild compared to the
Right.
first time.
So that very mild version of the chickenpox they have the second time, they spread around. So this very mild version of the uh, COVID that you get the second time, you can still spread to an entire unit.
Yeah, except for the fact that getting the vaccine doesn't prevent you from contracting and then spreading the COVID virus in the same way.
It increases
It
your
literally
immunity
doesn't.
to it. I never said it did. Nobody ever said it did. And if they
They
said that it
did.
did, no, they didn't. That's
Yes, they did.
people hearing it wrong. It will prevent you from. It will lessen, not prevent. It will lessen the amount that you spread because you have it for less time. You're over it faster, and you don't have to go to the hospital. You know where all the other sick people are. These 3,400 troops made a decision. This wasn't a decision they couldn't see coming. They were told, you will take this or you will be separated. They made that choice, and that's acceptable. I accept their choice. If they said, I refuse, this mRNA stuff is not tested, it contains messenger RNA, I will not do this, and I do not agree with it, then that is a choice they made. I respect their choice, and I'm okay with them being gone. And I would give them a general discharge. I really would. I wouldn't call this a dishonorable discharge. This is a choice they're making. But these aren't infants who don't know what they're doing. These are people who are told the consequences of their actions and they took that action. That's all. And if
Yes,
and
except
if
that it's a difference between your livelihood and getting a shot.
right, and the vast, vast, vast majority of people who took the shot are not harmed by it. So they chose.
We'll see.
Well, yeah, we'll see. And but guess what? The people who say we'll see are going to be saying we'll see 10 years from now, 20 years from now, 30 years from now. Well, we'll see. Remember that mRNA stuff we got 30 years ago is going to do something to us 30 years from now. That's no way to live. Um,
Fauci, Dr. Fauci himself
mhm.
has said, has been on record saying that if we give something experimental and nothing happens in the first year or two, no big deal. But then 10, 20 years from now, if it happens, if something bad happens as a result, now we have problems. We don't know.
Nobody
I'm
knows anything.
saying, well, you know,
He's making the best decision he can at the moment. The best decision at the moment is to get as many of these people as many of these shots as you can. That is
well,
the best decision.
that was Fauci on record for the potential HIV vaccine
Hmm.
25 years ago.
Which
That
still
wasn't
doesn't
about
exist,
COVID.
right? Which still doesn't exist. There's no HIV vaccine. Um, and yes, if the worst case scenario, um, yes, that's where I was headed, Kyle. The shingles is formed from the chickenpox virus. So old people who receive the shingles, which is a disease that old people get, it's because the DNA from the chickenpox is still inside their system, and old folks lose their immune system starts acting up once you reach a certain age. I don't want to Google it because then you'll get pictures, and that's gross. Um, but the shingles is a disease that you get that is literally the chickenpox. You and I, who had chickenpox when we were kids, when we were in our 70s and 80s, that chickenpox virus might actually manifest as a disease called shingles. And it's not impossible for the uh, COVID vaccine to do the same. It's not impossible. They have suggested that it wouldn't, and they don't think there's any signs or evidence to suggest that it will. But if it does, 30 or 40 years from now, then we'll tackle that when it happens. It was still the right decision to give people this immunization. And it was the right decision. Okay, it wasn't the right decision to give them dishonorable discharge for this. I think it is the right decision for these 3,400 people to receive a general discharge by refusing to take the shot.
I think what upsets me is not their refusal to take the shot,
Hmm.
discharging them for that. I think that the refusal to recognize a positive COVID test uh, for the purpose of recognizing natural immunity,
Hmm.
which, according to the article I linked to, is as strong or stronger than the vaccine. That's what bothers me the
Right,
most.
but how do you prove it? The proving is the problem. If I've known people,
You document a positive COVID test.
and that positive COVID test is possibly wrong and uh, possibly, well, it's possibly wrong or possibly lied about. If you are willing, if you are one of these 3,400 people, you are willing to look your commanding officer in the face and say, I will not take that shot. You will have to discharge me. You're willing to lie about that that positive test. I
If you're one of those people that was doing that, then you also be willing to lie about getting the vaccination because
right.
the vaccination, what were they called? The different productions of the vaccine, the numbers for them were actually, some of them were posted online
Hmm.
with the correct dates and whatnot. So you could fake a vaccine card. If you were so inclined,
Hmm.
you could.
Right. And
Why would you fake why would you fake a positive COVID test and not a fake vaccine card
because a
when one of
positive
those
COVID test
is
is way easier
surefire?
to fake. Positive COVID test is far easier to fake.
No,
Yes, of course it is.
you got the COVID test. You went to a link on a website that said, "Hey, you tested positive," and you had to like you could screenshot that and send it to your your superior.
Hmm.
Whereas what the vaccination card is on a piece of letterboard.
Right, and it has numbers that are you would have to go out and find. Yeah, it's easier to fake a positive test than a positive than a proof of vaccination. But the point is that they would be willing to do these things. Uh, Let me tell you, I knew a guy who refused the flu shots. He refused the flu shots because he listened to conspiracy theorists who said that the flu shots were filled with uh, luciferin and all kinds of wacky DNA changing things, and he refused the flu shot. But he didn't do that easily. He told everybody he was allergic to eggs, which is true. If you're allergic to eggs, you shouldn't take the flu shot because the flu vaccine is cultivated inside an egg. So he found that there was a loophole, and then he lied about being a part of that loophole so that he wouldn't have to do the thing he didn't want to do. That's the type of person who can't be trusted. That's the type of people who we're dealing with here. And I'm sorry, there might be some really honest, hardworking members of this 3,400, but there are also uh, conspiracy theorists in that group. There are conspiracy theorists within this 3,400 troop group who are listening to Alex Jones and thinking that he is telling the truth and refusing to take it because there's a fucking Microsoft Bill Gates microchip inside it. Those people exist within that 3,400. And I'm sorry you got thrown out with them if you're an honest person, but you got thrown out with them. That's going to happen when in any group large enough. That's going to happen.
Um, I have to disagree.
Hmm. I hoped you would.
I just I think that people have even working for the government have a reasonable expectation that they won't be put at risk.
Okay.
Um, I think that the combination of factors, the fact that this is the first Myrna vaccine to make it to market,
Hmm.
that this is it was essentially, I'll say, rushed via Operation Warp Speed. I think gives them cause to be skeptical about it. And I think that if you had natural immunity already, the fact that the government was unwilling to recognize a positive COVID test as equivalent, even though now this study is definitive, we had previous ones that suggested it. Uh, Natural immunity is at least as effective. That's what upsets me. And people have been, and you even said you already knew that natural immunity was as effective
It's true.
uh,
It's always
for
been
a long
true of
time.
viruses. It's true of the cold. You've never had the same cold virus twice. Your body reacts the same way. But it is a different DNA each time.
My frustration is that this is something we should have thought about already. Like, if that's just true of all viruses, then a positive COVID test and being quarantined should have counted for natural inoculation, and we shouldn't have kicked people out if they had already been inoculated via natural immunity. Our our government is hurting for people right now. Our military, especially,
Are they?
they are.
Okay.
Retention is down across the board. Recruitment is down across the board, and this is not helping. It is, and I take that personally.
Hmm.
Like I it's so frustrating to see that we have this problem, and then to see that we didn't recognize natural immunity. People got kicked out who potentially could have gotten or could have made it through on that basis and stayed.
And I can see your point. If you contracted it, they did the tests, you got quarantined, and you claimed natural immunity, but people were claiming natural immunity for nothing, for no good reason. How many men
If you
have you?
could prove you had a positive test, I think that should have counted. But the proof
Hmm.
is where it matters.
Hmm. How many men have you met that say, "Oh, they can't have kids"? I've met lots of them who say that for no reason. It's an insane thing, but uh, they say it. And oh, I know a guy who said he had COVID before it was even in the news. The news comes out about COVID in 2019, and he's like, "Oh, well, that must have been what I had 2 weeks ago." In late 2018. Uh,
Well,
that must have
you
been
already
what I had
mentioned
then,
there's
and so he won't don't want doesn't want to get the shot because he already had it.
that's where the documentation comes into play. And again, another way you could probably have proved natural immunity
Hmm.
is with the blood test you mentioned, because we could prove that you had COVID antibodies.
Right, and that's expensive and time consuming, and literally every single member would have lined up to get it and said, I need this, I need this, I need this. You give that one test to one guy, and you have to give it to everybody.
No, just the people that claim they had it previously.
Everybody will claim that. They'll all say it.
Then they get it. That what the military already draws blood for a million reasons.
Right. And each one of
Just draw
those
blood again.
vials costs a couple of dollars. And yeah, I get what you're saying. I just think it's easier to. I know, and this is an easy thing. I'm telling you, it's convenience. It's easier to just say everybody gets the shot.
It's not easier to say that if you don't get the shot, we lose thousands and thousands of troops.
If it
That
were, yeah,
is retarded.
It's easy to do. They
It's
did it.
easy, but
It's
it's
literally already
stupid.
done.
It's a stupid move because you're already
It's
hurting for people, and now you're going to count 3,500 people. And
it's
again,
it's
the
not a
other
stupid
article I've
move.
read on this,
Hmm.
over 8,000.
Okay, it's not a stupid move because these people weren't going to follow orders, and they were possibly a, some percentage of them were Alex Jones pilled. Every every community is better when the Alex Jones pilled people are removed from it. All communities, all of them. And yes, it's
Yeah, they're
entirely
welcome back now
yeah. And so there is something uh, allowing them to
because
come
the
back.
government realized they fucked up because they did, and now they're welcome back. Except that who wants to come back when you're going to get fucked like that?
And telling you that I think we did a piss poor job. We did every state for themselves, and that is a shit way to control a a virus because the virus doesn't give a rat's ass between whether it's in Idaho or Montana. It doesn't care. And if there are different rules for Montana than Idaho, then you're gonna get uh, increased virus spread, and we spread it like crazy. And this is a
We do.
theme that I'm pointing towards to suggest that
Except that every strain of the virus that kills somebody dies out. The reason is because if that somebody dies, it no longer has the capacity to transfer itself to another person.
unless it did for the past 3 weeks while they're fighting for their life, and it passed to the nurses and it passed to the doctors and it passed to the emergency room guys that brought them in. You can spread it for weeks before you die from it.
But not all of those people will die.
No, not all those people die, but they are hurt by it. They
And then
are,
after they recover from it, they
they,
should be considered as having immunity.
yes, they should have immunity
There, well,
unless it goes through so many people that it mutates. Once you start mutating this thing, all of a sudden we're all reinfected again, and it's
with
gonna
a
keep
less
happening. And
potent version of the virus.
hopefully, unless the next mutation is worse, there's no guarantee that the next mutation will be less deadly than this one.
Well, there isn't any guarantee except for the fact that the next mutation, if it is more deadly, kills itself off by nature of killing people and not being able to transmit anymore.
Hopefully,
That is exactly how COVID itself has mutated.
so far
It
it
has mutated
has,
to become much less deadly because when it kills people, it can't propagate anymore.
except for when it did, when it was early. The next mutation, what I'm saying is the next mutation isn't guaranteed to be less dangerous. And the fact that we have allowed it to mutate, I think allowing it to mutate is the surest sign of our failure.
It still gets to mutate in vaccinated individuals too. So you're
Yes, it
saying that
does.
allowing it to mutate, as in we should have just been locked down for the last 2 years.
No, I'm saying that if we had locked down properly, it wouldn't have to be 2 years of half-assed measures. We have been doing 2, maybe even 3 years of half-assedness when it comes to COVID. And because of that, it has mutated, it has spread, and it will be an endemic. If we had done it right at the beginning, this would have been over years ago.
And I'm saying it was always going to be endemic.
Okay, well,
There was no chance there. In fact, there's no country then that has done it right
there,
because COVID has not been eradicated in a single country.
mm, no, it hasn't been eradicated. But there are places that mutations are happening more likely, more often.
Probably with larger populations and larger population concentrations.
And people who are disregarding safety measures.
But that doesn't mean that
If you disregard safety measures, you're more likely to
the
catch
way
it.
your theory here
Hmm.
suggests that there should be places having done it right should have been able to eradicate COVID from their countries. There are no
To
countries like that.
what? They would
So has nobody done it right?
probably not, but
And what does doing it right mean then?
I suppose that's a good point. What does doing it right mean? It means proper lockdowns, proper safety, and the waves go down, and then we eventually get to a point where hopefully there wouldn't be a mutation that undoes your immunity.
Proper lockdowns, proper safety, but and hopefully we hope for a variation doesn't or a mutation doesn't dodge your lockdowns and safety.
Well, the
Well,
mutation can't
what do
dodge
proper
those.
lockdowns and proper safety look like? If first of all, this is a novel disease that we've encountered, so we don't know what proper lockdowns look like.
We can
We don't know what
comprehend how
proper
to lock.
safety looked like.
Sure, we
In
can.
fact, we had arguments before about, like in Discord, about how whether whether the virus was even airborne or whether it was droplet transmitted.
Sure.
We didn't even
In the
know.
very beginning, we don't know the things, which is fine.
How
Which
do
is
you have
not
a
fine,
proper
but it's
lockdown and proper safety if you don't even know how the virus transmits?
figure it out and then tell people.
Too late.
Well,
It's already endemic.
it's it wasn't endemic until now. It's not endemic until it shows up in waves every year. Within those first couple of months, we could have figured it out, and we did figure it out. Within a couple of months, we knew what had to be done. Lockdowns, wait patiently for the immunization. But the immunizations now are not useful. The immunizations are not useful now because there are those mutations, and those mutations are only allowed because we allow it, because we disregard.
Those immunizations. Here's where you might agree with me. They were plenty useful.
They were useful. They are great. The immunization is a good thing, but it
Except
loses its effect because now we have mutations.
except that those mutations, none of them eliminate the spike protein that the immunization teaches the immune system to recognize and fight. However,
You're just saying there's a mutation, and I agree. There is a mutation. And if that mutation had not had the chance to spread, it would not matter.
all of the mutations contain that same spike protein, though. So one COVID vaccine should theoretically teach your immune system to fight it. And my argument is not against the COVID vaccine itself.
Mm-hmm.
My argument has always been in favor of the skepticism against getting a vaccine that is seen as new and experimental. I think that people should be skeptical of brand new medical treatments, ones that have not made its market before.
And if hindsight has that skepticism, means that you disregard that safety thing, we die. This is the theme that I keep pointing back towards. Americans disregard safety and then die. And we call it freedom, generally. Uh, I will disregard, Americans generally disregard safety and then die because of it. And that is the only point I was trying to get towards, is that we disregarded that and we paid the price. Some people are okay with that price being paid. Some people would rather drive around their neighborhood without a seatbelt. That is disregarding safety for your freedom. And you might die because of it. What do you think of that statement, though? My
I think
thesis
there's a
there.
point at which, and there's a quote as well. Let me just Google the quote real quick because I want to make sure I get it right. Ben Franklin. Those who would give up essential liberty to purchase a little temporary safety deserve neither liberty nor safety.
Got it on screen right now. Deserve neither? Fuck this guy.
Man, You're a
Oh,
harsh critic.
I'll say it. Hot take. Fuck Ben Franklin. I was kidding.
I think that if you give up enough if you give up enough liberty in the return for safety, then you do end up losing both.
I agree that it's possible, but we must talk about that next week.
All right,
I
we can
will.
talk about the meanings behind this quote next week
That's
as
fine.
our theme.
We will discuss this next week. I will.
Works for
We'll
me.
bring that up after the. We'll do headlines and then bring this up. Um, and I'm gonna go eat a lunch. I appreciate talking to you.
Yeah, man.
We did good today.
Long stream. Good
I know.
time.
Oh, hi. Thanks for sticking around to the end of the video. If you liked what you saw, hit the like button, press the subscribe button. Uh, if you want to tell me how right I am, feel free to leave a comment. If you want to tell me how wrong I am, leave a comment too. That's good. Um, this is just kind of a hobby for me, so I appreciate you coming by, giving it a watch, and pressing the YouTube buttons. Thanks.